The dust-laden wind howled across the Nevada plains as Willow Moretti clutched her father's letter in trembling hands. The promise of a new life in Winnemucca beckoning her west, despite the warnings of danger that filled the margins of his hastily scrawled note. It was 1878, and at 22, Willow had nothing left in Boston after the fire that claimed her mother and their family home, nothing except her father's invitation to join him in the silver mining town, where he'd struck a modest fortune. The stagecoach journey had been brutal, 6 days of jolting across increasingly rugged terrain, but even that hadn't prepared her for the mishap that left her stranded when the wheel broke just 15 miles from her destination. The driver had given her directions to a nearby ranch, promising to return with repairs, but as the sun climbed higher in the merciless sky, Willow felt the first worrying flush of heat rise to her cheeks. By the time she stumbled upon the modest ranch house, her vision had begun to swim. The last thing she remembered was a tall figure emerging from the barn, strong arms catching her as the world tilted sideways. "Madam, madam, can you hear me?" The voice was deep, tinged with concern as calloused hands gently lifted her head. Through the fog of confusion, she glimpsed intense blue eyes beneath the brim of a worn hat before darkness claimed her completely. Hank Vance had been breaking a new Mustang when he spotted the woman staggering toward his property. In 8 years of ranching the harsh Nevada territory, he'd never seen anyone look so out of place, her city clothes caked with dust, her dark hair falling from what had once been an elegant arrangement. But it was the unnatural flush on her face that sent alarm through him. After carrying her unconscious form into his cabin, Hank pressed a cool cloth to her forehead, worry creasing his weathered face. At 30, he'd seen his share of prairie fever, but usually in trail hands or miners, not elegantly dressed young women wandering the desert alone. "You're burning up," he muttered, though she couldn't hear him. He'd need to bring her fever down fast. Willow drifted in and out of consciousness, vaguely aware of being moved, of cool water on her skin, of someone speaking in low, reassuring tones. When she finally opened her eyes with some clarity, she found herself in an unfamiliar bed in a sparsely furnished room, a man dozing in a chair beside her. "Water," she rasped, her throat painfully dry. The man startled awake, revealing those same intense blue eyes she'd glimpsed before. Without hesitation, he reached for a cup on the nearby table and helped her sit up enough to drink. "Easy now," he cautioned. "Small sips." When she'd drunk her fill, Willow sank back against the pillows. "How long have I been here?" "Since yesterday afternoon." "You collapsed on my property with a raging fever." His voice had a gentle drawl that contrasted with his rugged appearance. "I'm Hank Vance. This is my ranch, Willow Moretti," she replied weakly. "I was on my way to Winnemucca. The stagecoach broke down." "Winnemucca's still 15 miles west," Hank explained. "And you won't be heading there any time soon. That fever's got a fierce hold on you." As if to confirm his words, a violent shiver passed through her body despite the sweat beading on her forehead. Willow tried to protest, to explain about her father waiting for her, but the room began spinning again, and darkness reclaimed her. For 3 days, Hank barely left her side. He'd sent his ranch hand Miguel to town with a message for the stagecoach company and to fetch the doctor, but Dr. Wilson was away attending a difficult birth at her remote homestead. Miguel returned with medicines but no physician. Hank bathed Willow's burning forehead with cool cloths, spooned broth between her parched lips when she was lucid enough to swallow, and watched with growing concern as the fever refused to break. Having lost his parents and younger sister to illness years before, he found himself praying with an intensity he hadn't felt in years. "You need to fight this," he told her during one of her brief moments of consciousness. You've got someone waiting for you in Winnemucca, remember. Your pa needs you to get well. On the fourth night, as a spring storm lashed against the cabin windows, Willow's condition worsened. Her breathing grew shallow, her skin burning hotter than ever despite Hank's efforts. Desperate, he lifted her from the bed, carried her to the washroom, and lowered her fully clothed into the tub of cool water he'd prepared. "I'm sorry," he murmured as she gasped at the shock. "I know it's uncomfortable, but we've got to bring this fever down." As he held her in the water, supporting her head, Willow's eyes fluttered open, clearer than they'd been in days. "Am I dying?" she whispered. The vulnerability in her question tore at Hank's heart. "Not if I have anything to say about it," he answered firmly. Then, leaning closer, he added in a fierce whisper, "Live for me, Willow. Just live." Something in his voice reached her through the fever's haze. Their eyes locked, a moment of connection transcending their brief acquaintance. "I don't even know you," she whispered. His mouth quirked into a half-smile. "Then live so you can get to know me." By dawn, the fever had broken. Willow awoke to find herself in a fresh nightgown she didn't recognize, tucked under clean sheets, with Hank asleep in the chair beside her bed. His head was tilted at an uncomfortable angle, days of stubble darkening his jaw, yet there was something undeniably appealing about him even in exhaustion. "Mr. Vance," she called softly. He woke instantly, alert despite his obvious fatigue. When he realized she was awake and lucid, relief washed over his features. "You're back with us. Thanks to you, it seems." Willow attempted to sit up but found herself weaker than expected. Hank moved quickly to assist her, arranging pillows behind her back. "You gave me quite a scare, Miss Morty. Please call me Willow. I think we're beyond formalities after." She paused, realizing she had no idea what had happened during her illness. A flush that had nothing to do with fever colored her cheeks. Understanding her embarrassment, Hank explained, "My neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez helped with changing your clothes and such. I just kept the fever cloths coming and made sure you didn't." He hesitated. "Well, that you stayed with us." The simple phrase held the weight of his vigilance, of the hours spent battling for her life. "Thank you doesn't seem adequate. No thanks needed. Anyone would have done the same." But they both knew that wasn't true. Not everyone would have taken in a stranger, nursed them day and night, and spoken words of encouragement when hope seemed dim. Over the next few days, as Willow slowly regained her strength, she learned more about the quiet rancher who'd saved her life. Hank had come west after the war, working cattle drives until he'd saved enough to purchase this modest spread. He raised horses primarily, with a small herd of cattle and enough crops to be largely self-sufficient. "It's not much," he admitted as he helped her to the porch for her first venture out of bed. "But it's mine, free and clear." The pride in his voice was unmistakable, and Willow found herself admiring the neat ranch house, the well-tended corrals, and the majesty of the Sierra Nevada mountains in the distance. "I think it's wonderful," she said sincerely. "You've built something real here." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits despite their different backgrounds. The moment was broken by the arrival of Miguel, returning from town with supplies and news. Willow's father had been inquiring frantically about her whereabouts since the stagecoach company reported the breakdown. "I should get word to him," Willow said, guilt washing over her. "He must be worried sick." "Miguel can ride to town tomorrow with a letter," Hank offered, "but you're still not strong enough to travel." Though she knew he was right, Willow felt torn. "I've imposed on your hospitality far too long already. It's no imposition." Hank's response was immediate and firm. "Besides, You still owe me the story of what brings a Boston lady to Winnemucca, Nevada." His teasing tone made her smile. "How did you know I'm from Boston? You talk in your sleep, Miss Morty." His eyes crinkled with amusement. "Mostly about clam chowder and something called the Common." Embarrassed but relieved her fever dreams hadn't revealed anything more personal, Willow laughed her first real laugh since arriving out west. The sound seemed to please Hank immensely. That evening, as they shared a simple supper of venison stew, Willow told him about the fire that had claimed her mother and their home, about her father's letters describing the promise of Nevada, and about her journey west with hopes of starting anew. "Pa came out here 3 years ago," she explained. "The letters were sporadic at first, but this past year he's been writing more regularly, telling me about the silver mine stake he'd claimed and the little house he'd built. When the fire happened, well, there was nothing keeping me in Boston anymore." Hank listened intently, offering sympathy for her losses without the cloying pity she'd endured from others. "Your father's a fortunate man, having a daughter brave enough to cross the country to join him." "Brave or foolish," Willow sighed. "I clearly wasn't prepared for the journey. Few Easterners are their first time out. The West has a way of testing everyone who comes here." Hank refilled her coffee cup. "But you survived your first test, only because you were there." Their gazes held for a moment longer than necessary, and Willow felt a curious fluttering in her chest that had nothing to do with her recent illness. The next day, Miguel rode to Winnemucca with Willow's letter explaining her situation to her father. Hank expected the man might come immediately to collect his daughter, but instead, Miguel returned with a brief note. "He says he's in the middle of a critical phase with the mine," Willow explained, disappointment evident in her voice as she read her father's response. "He's relieved I'm safe and sends money for my care, but asks if I can remain here until he can get away, perhaps in 2 weeks' time." Hank carefully masked his reaction, not wanting to reveal his pleasure at the prospect of Willow staying longer. "You're welcome here for as long as needed." As Willow's strength returned, she began helping around the ranch house, initially with simple tasks like preparing vegetables for meals, then gradually taking over more of the cooking. Hank discovered she made excellent bread and had a gift for turning basic provisions into surprisingly tasty meals. "Where did a Boston society lady learn to cook like this?" he asked one evening after a particularly good rabbit stew. Willow laughed, the sound becoming more frequent and natural as the days passed. "I was hardly society. My father was a bookkeeper, my mother a seamstress. I've been cooking since I was tall enough to reach the stove." Their days fell into a comfortable rhythm. Mornings, Hank worked with his horses while Willow tended to household matters. Afternoons, when the spring sun was warmest, he often found excuses to be near the house mending a fence, repairing a shutter while Willow sat on the porch, regaining her strength and sometimes reading aloud from one of Hank's few books. In the evenings, they talked. Hank told her about his years in the Union Army, about the cattle drives and the wild country he'd seen before settling in Nevada. Willow shared stories of Boston, of the bustling harbor and crowded markets, of the literary circles her father had sometimes brushed against through his bookkeeping work for publishers. "I've never been east of the Mississippi," Hank admitted. "Sometimes I wonder what I'm missing." "And I never imagined leaving New England," Willow replied. "Yet here I am." One week after her fever broke, Hank suggested a short ride to help rebuild her strength. "Nothing strenuous," he promised. "Just down to the creek and back." Willow hesitated. "I've never actually been on a horse before." Hank's surprise was evident. "How were you planning to get around in Winnemucca?" "I assumed there would be carriages, or that I'd walk. Pa never mentioned needing to ride." With a chuckle, Hank shook his head. Miss Morty, I believe your education in Western living needs to begin immediately. Every respectable Nevada resident needs to know how to sit a horse. He selected his gentlest mare, a dun-colored quarter horse named Penny, and spent the morning teaching Willow the basics of horsemanship. She was a quick learner despite her initial nervousness, and by midday, she was riding at a walk beside him along the creek that bordered his property. "It's beautiful here," she commented, taking in the cottonwoods lining the waterway and the purple shadows of distant mountains. "So different from home, but beautiful in its own way." "That's how most of us feel about the West," Hank replied. "It's harsh and demanding, but once it gets in your blood, no other place feels quite right." When they returned to the ranch house, Willow was sore but exhilarated. "Thank you for teaching me," she said as Hank helped her dismount, his hands strong and steady at her waist. For a moment after her feet touched ground, neither moved. Hank's hands lingered, and Willow found herself looking up into his face, noting the sun creases at the corners of his eyes, the small scar above his right eyebrow, the unexpected softness of his expression as he gazed down at her. The spell was broken by Miguel calling from the barn about a problem with one of the new colts. Hank stepped back, clearing his throat. "I'd better see to that," Willow nodded, suddenly aware of her racing heart. "Of course." That night, she lay awake longer than usual, replaying the moment in her mind and wondering at her reaction to a man she'd known for such a short time. The next day brought an unexpected visitor, Sheriff Thomas Riley from Winnemucca, a barrel-chested man with a salt and pepper mustache who removed his hat politely when Willow answered the door. "Miss Morty, your father asked me to check on you personally," he explained. "Wanted to make sure you were recovering well and being properly looked after." "That's very kind of him," Willow replied, inviting the sheriff inside. "Mr. Vance has been an exemplary host." Sheriff Riley's eyes took in the neat ranch house and Willow's healthy appearance. "So I see. Your father will be relieved. He's been beside himself since learning of your illness." "Is he well?" Willow asked eagerly. His letter was so brief. "Busy with the mine, but well enough." The sheriff accepted the coffee Willow offered. "That strike of his is proving richer than anyone expected. He's hired 4 men to help with the extraction." Pride swelled in Willow's chest. Her father had always worked for others. To hear he was now employing men himself was a sign of how much his circumstances had changed. When Hank returned from checking fence lines, he greeted the sheriff cordially, though Willow noticed a certain reserve between the men. "Vance," Riley acknowledged with a nod. "Keeping well, can't complain. How's law enforcement treating you? Busy enough?" "Got a new saloon in town bringing the usual troubles." Riley turned to Willow. "Your father asked if you're able to travel yet. He's anxious to have you settled in town." Before Willow could answer, Hank spoke up. "Miss Morty was dangerously ill just over a week ago. She's only just started riding short distances. I wouldn't recommend the journey to town for at least another week." The sheriff's eyebrows rose slightly at Hank's authoritative tone. "I see. Well, I'll let Edward know you're on the mend but need more time." He finished his coffee and stood. "I should get back. Town doesn't police itself." After Riley departed, Willow noticed Hank's unusually taciturn mood. "Is something wrong?" she asked as they prepared supper. Hank hesitated, then admitted, "Riley and I have history." "Nothing serious, but we've been on opposite sides of a few disputes over water rights and cattle grazing. He seemed to respect you, though." "We respect each other well enough. I just don't trust him to have your best interests at heart when it comes to medical advice." Hank focused intently on slicing bread. "Your fever was dangerous, Willow. Another day without breaking it and I might have lost you." The simple phrase, "I might have lost you," sent warmth spreading through Willow's chest. "I know," she said softly, "and I'm grateful you didn't let that happen." Their eyes met across the table, and this time neither looked away quickly. Something was changing between them, something neither had anticipated but both were beginning to acknowledge. The next few days brought spring storms that kept them largely confined to the ranch house. Hank caught up on indoor tasks, mending tack, repairing tools, while Willow, growing stronger by the day, took over most household duties and discovered an unexpected contentment in the simple routine of ranch life. During a particularly fierce thunderstorm, Hank found Willow standing on the covered porch, watching lightning fork across the dark sky. "We never had storms like this in Boston," she explained when he joined her. "It's terrifying and magnificent at once." As thunder crashed overhead, Willow instinctively stepped closer to Hank. Without thinking, he put an arm around her shoulders. They stood that way for several minutes, watching nature's display, until Hank became acutely aware of her warmth against his side, the scent of her hair, the way her breathing synchronized with his own. When she looked up at him, eyes reflecting the lightning flashes, Hank knew he was in danger of falling for this Eastern woman who'd literally collapsed into his life. The realization should have sent him retreating to safer emotional ground, but instead, he found himself lowering his head until his lips met hers in a gentle kiss. Willow responded with a soft sigh, her hand coming to rest against his chest. The kiss deepened, tender but threaded with growing passion, until another thunderclap directly overhead startled them apart. "I shouldn't have done that," Hank said immediately, though his eyes conveyed no regret. "I'm glad you did," Willow replied quietly. "I've been wondering what it would be like." The honest admission brought a smile to his face. "And? I might need another example to form a proper opinion." His laugh was cut short by her rising on tiptoes to initiate a second kiss, this one leaving no doubt about mutual attraction. Later that night, lying in bed listening to the storm's fury gradually subside, Willow contemplated the unexpected turn her journey had taken. She'd come west expecting to build a new life with her father, never imagining she might find someone else entirely. The morning brought clear skies, and the realization that only a week remained before her father would likely come to bring her to Winnemucca. Neither Willow nor Hank mentioned the kisses they'd shared, but something had shifted between them. Glances held longer, casual touches lingered. Conversations flowed with greater ease. That afternoon, Hank suggested another riding lesson. "If you're going to be a proper Nevadan, you'll need to handle more than just walking pace," he explained. Under his patient guidance, Willow progressed to a trot, and even a brief canter, her confidence growing with each success. They rode farther than before, to a bluff overlooking a verdant valley where wildflowers carpeted the ground between sagebrush. "This is my favorite spot on the whole ranch," Hank told her as they dismounted to rest the horses. "I come here when I need to remember why I chose this life." Willow spread the blanket he'd brought while Hank unpacked a simple lunch from his saddlebags. They ate companionably, discussing his plans for expanding the horse breeding operation and her hopes for helping her father establish a permanent home in Winnemucca. "What would you have done in Boston if the fire hadn't happened?" Hank asked, genuinely curious about the path her life might have taken. Willow considered the question. "I'd been teaching at a small girls' school. I enjoyed it, but—" She hesitated. There was a certain sameness to each day. "I sometimes wondered if that would be my entire life, teaching other people's children, living in my parents' home, never experiencing anything beyond the familiar streets of Boston. And now I've survived a stagecoach breakdown, a dangerous fever, and learned to ride a horse," she said with a smile. "I'd say my horizons have expanded considerably." Hank leaned back on his elbows, studying her. "Do you ever regret coming west?" Willow's answer was immediate. "Not for a moment." When they returned to the ranch house, they found Miguel waiting with news. Edward Morty had sent word that he would arrive in 3 days to bring Willow to town. "He's hired a proper carriage and everything," Miguel reported. "Says he's got the house all prepared for a young lady." Willow thanked him for the message, but when she met Hank's eyes, she saw her own mixed emotions reflected there. Her father's arrival should have been purely good news, yet now it meant leaving the ranch and Hank. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson, Hank finally addressed what they'd both been avoiding. "Willow, I need to say something before your father arrives." Her heart quickened at his serious tone. "Yes." "I've known you less than 3 weeks. By any reasonable standard, that's not long enough to know your own mind about a person." He turned to face her directly. "But I've never been one for conventional wisdom, and the truth is, I don't want you to go." The simple declaration hung between them, honest and unadorned. "I have obligations to my father," Willow began carefully. "He's crossed the country alone, built a life here, and now sent for me." "I understand that," Hank assured her. "I'm not asking you to abandon him. Winnemucca's only 15 miles away, I'm just saying." He took her hand. "I'd like the chance to court you properly, to see if what started between us might grow into something more." Willow's fingers tightened around his. "I'd like that too." The smile that spread across Hank's face warmed her more than any summer sun. "Then I'll speak to your father when he comes." The next 2 days passed in a curious blend of anticipation and regret. Willow packed her few belongings while helping Hank prepare the ranch house for her father's visit. They spoke of practical matters, how often Hank might reasonably ride to town, whether her father would approve of their courtship, but beneath the conversations ran a current of deeper emotion neither was ready to name. On her final night at the ranch, Willow found herself unable to sleep. She rose and wrapped a shawl around her nightgown before stepping quietly onto the porch. The spring night was cool but not cold, the sky ablaze with more stars than she'd ever seen in the light-polluted skies of Boston. She wasn't surprised when the door opened behind her and Hank emerged, as if he'd sensed her presence. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked, coming to stand beside her at the railing. "I keep thinking about how different everything might have been if that stagecoach wheel hadn't broken," Willow admitted. "I'd be in Winnemucca now, settled into life with my father, and we'd never have met." "I don't believe that," Hank said quietly. "Some things are meant to happen, wheel or no wheel." Willow turned to study his profile in the starlight. "Do you really believe that?" "I have to." His voice grew husky. "Otherwise, I have to admit that the most important meeting of my life was just blind chance." The words sent a thrill through her. "The most important?" Instead of answering directly, Hank drew her into his arms. "I've been alone on this ranch for a long time, Willow. I told myself it was enough, the land, the horses, the work, but having you here." He touched her cheek gently. "It's shown me what I've been missing." Willow leaned into his touch. "I came west expecting a new beginning, but I never imagined it would start quite this way." When they kissed this time, it held the weight of promise of more days, more discoveries, more moments like this one. They parted reluctantly, both aware of the propriety they needed to maintain with her father's imminent arrival. "Good night, Willow," Hank whispered, pressing a final kiss to her forehead. "Good night," she replied, though she doubted sleep would come easily with her heart so full. Edward Morty arrived shortly after noon the next day, driving a smart buggy pulled by a matched pair of bays. At 55, he was still robust despite graying temples, with the same dark eyes as his daughter and a no-nonsense manner that spoke of his New England upbringing. Willow rushed to embrace him, tears springing to her eyes at this reunion after 3 long years of separation. "Pa, you look wonderful." "As do you, despite this illness I've heard about," he replied, holding her at arm's length to examine her. "When that stage-coach driver came to town with news of the breakdown and no sign of you, I feared the worst. Mr. Vance found me before anything truly terrible could happen," Willow assured him, turning to where Hank stood respectfully by the porch steps. "Pa, this is Henry Vance. He's been caring for me since I fell ill." Edward stepped forward to shake Hank's hand firmly. "I understand I owe you a considerable debt, Mr. Vance. My daughter is all I have in this world." "No debt necessary, sir. Anyone would have done the same." Edward's shrewd eyes assessed the younger man. "Perhaps, but not everyone would have provided such thorough care. The doctor in town tells me prairie fever is no small matter." "Your daughter is remarkably strong," Hank replied, his glance toward Willow conveying far more than his words. "She fought hard." After refreshments and conversation, during which Edward described his silver mine and the growing opportunities in Winnemucca, the time came to load Willow's belongings into the buggy. While she gathered her few personal items from the bedroom, Hank seized the opportunity to speak privately with her father. "Mr. Morty, there's something I'd like to discuss with you." Edward regarded him steadily. "I believe I can guess the nature of it." "Sir." "Mr. Vance, I may have been away from my daughter for 3 years, but I still know her well enough to recognize when her feelings are engaged." Edward's expression remained neutral. "Am I to understand you wish to court her?" Hank nodded, impressed by the man's perception. "With your permission. I know our acquaintance has been brief, but I hold your daughter in the highest regard, and I believe she may return my feelings." "And what exactly can you offer a young woman who's crossed the continent to start a new life? This ranch is modest at best." Though the question stung, Hank answered honestly. "A good living that improves each year, a solid home, and complete devotion to her happiness. I can't offer luxury, but there would never be want, and never a day when she'd doubt my commitment to her." Edward considered this, then asked, "And if her happiness eventually meant returning east?" The question caught Hank off guard. He paused, then straightened his shoulders. "If that's what Willow truly wanted, I'd find a way to make it work. But I believe she's finding her own connection to this land, just as I did when I first came here." A smile finally broke through Edward's stern demeanor. "A fair answer. Very well, Mr. Vance. You may call on my daughter in Winnemucca. We've taken a house on Mellarkey Street near the east end of town." Relief and gratitude flooded through Hank. "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me yet," Edward warned, though his eyes had softened. "I've just given permission for courtship, not marriage. That's a separate conversation entirely." When Willow emerged with her carpet bag, she found the two men on surprisingly cordial terms. Her questioning glance at Hank was met with a subtle nod that sent her heart soaring. The goodbye was difficult nonetheless. Standing beside the buggy, Willow struggled to find the right words. "I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done. You could come back and visit," Hank suggested, his tone light though his eyes conveyed deeper meaning. "I hear Penny will miss her favorite rider." Willow smiled through the tears threatening to fall. "I'd like that." As Edward helped her into the buggy, Hank stepped forward to press something into her hand, a small carved wooden horse, its lines simple but graceful. "Something to remember us by," he said quietly. Willow clutched the carving tightly as the buggy pulled away, turning to watch Hank's figure grow smaller in the distance, the ranch that had become so dear to her disappearing around a bend in the road. "He seems a good man," Edward commented when they were well on their way. "The best I've ever known," Willow replied with simple honesty. Her father nodded thoughtfully. "Then I suppose we'll be seeing more of him." Life in Winnemucca proved both similar to and wildly different from what Willow had expected. Her father's house was modest but comfortable, situated on a quiet street at the edge of the growing town. The silver mine that had brought him west was indeed prospering, affording them a standard of living somewhat higher than they'd known in Boston. Willow quickly found her place in the community, first by assisting at the small school, then by establishing a lending library from the books she'd brought west and others donated by townspeople. The work gave her purpose and introduced her to the diverse population of the mining town families from as far away as China and Cornwall, single men seeking fortune, merchants building businesses to serve the growing community. True to his word, Hank rode into town regularly, sometimes staying for dinner with Willow and her father, other times taking Willow for drives in the countryside. Edward observed their developing relationship with cautious approval, noting how his daughter blossomed in the young rancher's company. By midsummer, Willow had become as comfortable on horseback as she'd once been navigating Boston's crowded streets. She often rode out to Hank's ranch on Penny, whom he insisted was now her horse, spending the day helping with manageable tasks before returning to town by early evening. It was during one such visit in August, as they picnicked beside the creek where wildflowers still bloomed despite the summer heat, that Hank finally spoke the words that had been building between them for months. "I love you, Willow," he said simply, reaching for her hand. "I think I started falling that very first day, when you were burning with fever and still managed to thank me for the water I gave you." Willow's heart swelled with joy. "And I love you. Though I think it might have been the moment you taught me to mount Penny without falling off that sealed my fate." Hank laughed, then grew serious again. "I've spoken with your father. He's given his blessing if you'll have me." "For what exactly?" Willow teased, though she knew perfectly well what he was asking. Rising to one knee beside the blanket, Hank took both her hands in his. "Willow Moretti, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? I can promise you a life that won't always be easy but will never lack for love or commitment." "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "Nothing would make me happier." The kiss that followed sealed their promise, sweet and tender at first, then deepening with the certainty of their future together. They were married in October, when the aspen trees turned gold against the mountains and the air carried the first hint of winter's approach. The ceremony took place at Hank's their ranch now, with Edward giving away the bride and most of Winnemucca in attendance. Sheriff Riley even set aside his old differences with Hank to wish the couple well. Willow wore a gown of cream-colored silk her father had ordered specially from San Francisco, with wildflowers in her hair instead of the traditional veil. Hank, looking almost unfamiliar in a new black suit, couldn't take his eyes off her as she walked toward him on her father's arm. The minister's words were nearly lost to Willow in the overwhelming joy of the moment, but she clearly heard the final pronouncement that made Hank her husband and the cheers that erupted from their guests afterward. At the celebration that followed, Edward Moretti raised a toast to the newlyweds. "To my daughter, who came west to find a new life and found love instead, and to my new son-in-law, who saved her in more ways than one. May your years together be as boundless as these western skies." Later, as twilight settled over the land and the last guests departed, Hank found Willow on the porch, gazing out at the mountains silhouetted against the darkening sky. "Having second thoughts, Mrs. Vance?" he asked, slipping an arm around her waist. The new name sent a thrill through her. "Not one," she assured him, leaning into his embrace. "I was just thinking about how close I came to never knowing this place or you." "But fate had other ideas," Hank murmured against her hair. "Fate and a broken stagecoach wheel," Willow agreed with a smile. As the first stars appeared overhead, Hank led his bride inside to the home they would share, the future stretching before them as vast and promising as the Nevada territory itself. Winter brought early snows that year, transforming the landscape into a glittering wonderland Willow had never imagined possible in the desert. She discovered the unique challenges of ranch life in harsh, weather-frozen pumps, livestock needing extra care, the vital importance of preparations made during autumn. But she also discovered the incomparable joy of winter evenings by the fire with Hank, planning improvements for the ranch, reading aloud from books Edward sent from town, and sharing the deep connection that grew stronger with each passing day. Spring arrived with explosive force, the desert blooming in a riot of colors that took Willow's breath away. With the warmer weather came news that transformed their lives once more. Willow was expecting their first child. Hank's reaction to the announcement was everything she'd hoped, his usually reserved demeanor giving way to unrestrained joy as he lifted her in a careful embrace. "A baby," he murmured against her hair. "Our baby." The pregnancy progressed well through summer and fall, with frequent visits from Edward, who couldn't conceal his excitement at becoming a grandfather. Dr. Wilson checked on Willow regularly, pronouncing her healthy and the baby developing properly. As her December due date approached, Hank grew increasingly anxious, remembering too clearly the fever that had nearly taken her when they first met. He insisted on hiring a woman from town to help with household tasks, and made arrangements for the doctor to stay at the ranch when Willow's time came. "You're fussing unnecessarily," Willow told him one evening as he checked again that everything was prepared for the baby's arrival. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. Not my wife, not my child," Hank replied, his concern evident beneath the light tone. "Indulge me." Understanding the fear behind his protectiveness, Willow relented. "Very well, fuss all you want." When labor began during a December snowstorm, Hank's preparations proved invaluable. The helper was already in residence, and Miguel rode through the blizzard to fetch Dr. Wilson, who arrived just as Willow's pains intensified. Through the long night that followed, Hank never left her side, wiping her brow, offering encouragement and whispering words of love as she battled through the increasingly difficult contractions. "You can do this," he told her as dawn approached and exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. "You're the strongest person I know, Willow. Just a little longer." Drawing strength from his unwavering support, Willow found the reserves to continue, and as the first light of morning filtered through the bedroom window, their son entered the world with a robust cry that brought tears to both parents' eyes. "He's perfect, Doctor," Wilson announced, placing the swaddled infant in Willow's arms. "A fine, healthy boy." Looking down at the tiny face, a perfect blend of herself and Hank, Willow felt a wave of love unlike anything she'd experienced before. When Hank sat carefully on the edge of the bed, his expression one of wonder as he touched their son's cheek with a gentle finger, she knew her heart couldn't possibly contain more joy. "What shall we name him?" Hank asked, his voice thick with emotion. They had discussed various options but made no final decision. Now, looking at their child, Willow knew with certainty. "Benjamin Edward Vance," she said, "after your father and mine." Hank's smile confirmed her choice. "It suits him perfectly." Edward arrived the following day, having set out the moment Miguel brought news of his grandson's birth, despite the continuing snow. His weathered face softened completely when Willow placed Benjamin in his arms. "He has your mother's chin," he told Willow, eyes suspiciously bright. "And your determination, if that cry is any indication." Life adjusted to accommodate their newest family member. Hank rearranged his work schedule to spend more time near the house, often wearing Benjamin in a sling against his chest as he completed nearby tasks. Willow discovered that motherhood, though exhausting, brought a fulfillment that complemented rather than replaced her other interests. By the following spring, she had established a small classroom in one corner of the ranch house, where she taught the children of neighboring ranches twice weekly. Benjamin, now crawling enthusiastically, became the class mascot, adored by the older children. As Benjamin's first birthday approached, Hank surprised Willow with news that he had purchased an additional parcel of land adjoining their property, prime grazing land, with a year-round spring that would allow them to expand their cattle operation. "The horse breeding is stable now," he explained as they walked the new boundary line, Benjamin riding securely on Hank's shoulders. "But diversifying will give us more security for the future, for Benjamin and maybe." He glanced at her with a question in his eyes. Willow smiled, understanding his unspoken thought. "Maybe for his brothers and sisters someday, if you want that," Hank said carefully. "I know Benjamin's birth was difficult." "It was," Willow acknowledged, "but so worthwhile." She reached for his hand. "I'd like more children when the time is right." The relief and joy on his face told her how much he'd wanted the same but had been unwilling to presume. That autumn brought change to the family when Edward announced he had sold his interest in the silver mine and purchased the town's only bookshop, whose owner was returning east. "Mining's a young man's game," he explained when he invited them to see the shop. "And I miss being surrounded by books. This feels right for my next chapter." The bookshop thrived under Edward's knowledgeable management, becoming a cultural center for Winnemucca as the town continued to grow with Nevada's admission to statehood in 1864. He maintained his home but spent increasing amounts of time at the ranch with Willow, Hank, and Benjamin, especially during the winters when traveling became difficult. Benjamin grew into a lively, curious child with his father's blue eyes and his mother's quick mind. By age 3, he was reading simple words and riding his own pony, a gentle Shetland Hank had specifically trained for him. Their family expanded again in 1866 with the birth of their daughter, Sarah Rose, whose arrival was considerably easier than Benjamin's had been. Hank's relief was palpable when Dr. Wilson pronounced both mother and daughter in excellent health just hours after the birth. "She looks just like you," he told Willow as they admired their newborn that evening, Benjamin peering cautiously at his sister from his perch on Hank's knee. "Poor child," Willow joked, though she secretly hoped Sarah would inherit her father's striking blue eyes and natural grace. Life settled into the rhythm of seasons that marked ranching life, the intense work of calving and foaling in spring, the long days of summer with hay to cut and store, the cattle drives of fall, the relative quiet of winter when family time took precedence over all but essential chores. The ranch prospered under their combined management. Willow's organizational skills complemented Hank's practical knowledge, and together they built an operation respected throughout the region. Their horses became known for quality and reliable temperament, while their cattle fetched premium prices at market. Through it all, their love deepened in ways neither could have anticipated during those fevered days when they first met. The passion remained, but it was now enriched by shared experiences, mutual respect, and the profound understanding that comes from building a life together through both joys and hardships. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Hank surprised Willow with a gift he'd been working on secretly for months, an expansion of the ranch house that included a proper library with floor-to-ceiling shelves and comfortable reading chairs. "For all those books your father keeps sending," he explained as he showed her the room, and for teaching the children. I know how much you miss having a proper classroom sometimes." Deeply touched by his thoughtfulness, Willow had no words. Instead, she showed her appreciation in ways that required the new door to have a very secure lock. The following morning, standing on the porch with coffee as they watched the sunrise paint the mountains, a ritual they'd maintained since their earliest days together, Willow leaned against her husband's solid warmth. "Do you ever think about how different our lives might have been if that stagecoach wheel hadn't broken?" she asked, echoing a question from their courtship days. Hank considered this as he had years before. "Sometimes. But then I remember what you taught me during those days when your fever burned so high." "What did I teach you?" Willow asked, curious about a time she barely remembered. "That some things are meant to be, no matter what obstacles arise." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "You fought so hard to live, Willow. Even before you knew me, something in you refused to surrender." "I had excellent motivation," she reminded him. "A certain cowboy who never left my side and kept whispering live for me." "Best words I ever spoke," Hank murmured, turning her in his arms to kiss her properly as the new day brightened around them, illuminating the home and life they'd built from an unexpected beginning, a broken wheel, a dangerous fever, and the love that had saved them both.